Hello everybody, welcome to Stafford Knott storytelling videos to try and cheer us up during this period of gloom. The story I'm going to tell today is actually set at Bad King John's court. Bad King John had taken against a particular knight who wasn't a bad sort of fellow in his own way, but Bad King John had decided that this knight ought to be executed for what he had done. However, the knight had a lot of good friends, and the other barons decided that they wanted to persuade the king to save the knight's life. So they went and talked to him, and they went to try and persuade him. And in the end, Bad King John agreed, but only on special terms, and he enjoyed watching the knight squirm as he told him what these special terms were. The knight was going to have to answer 3 questions accurately to Bad King John's satisfaction after a year and a day. And these questions were: what am I worth? How long would it take me to get round the world? And what am I thinking now? Well, the knight was completely flummoxed, and in a great deal of distress, he managed to get all his equipment together and his horse together, and he decided to ride off all up down the length and breadth of the British Isles. Now, he went to meet lots of different people because he thought all kinds of people might know the answers to these questions. And he talked to people like fishermen and peasants and other knights and nursemaids and servants and wheelwrights and playwrights. I'm not going to take you to meet them so much as to take you to go to places that you might like to be, because I think that's what we're missing during this lockdown, is going out to places that we're fond of. Now, I want you to think in your own minds, what are your particular places that you have loved visiting? One of the ones I can think of is Marlowe's Beach in Pembrokeshire, and I can imagine the knight riding his horse along those flat sands, avoiding the strange spikes of rock. I think there he might find a fisherman, but the fisherman wouldn't know the answers to those 3 questions. Another place he would probably ride through would be the Forest of Dean at this time of year, with all the bluebells flowering round the trunks of the trees. But again, although he might meet people who go into the forest to cut wood and to burn charcoal, he probably wouldn't get the answers to the questions from them. Another place he would gallop through would be the gorge at Simon's Yacht, and again he would look up and see the birds flying through the sky and wish he could be as free as them. But no, nobody would be able to answer his questions. And another place I can think of is along beside the River Severn, walking up the banks from Bridge North, along beside the flowing water. But again, although he might meet a different sort of fisherman there, he wouldn't actually get the answers to his questions. In the end, he rode desperately further northward. He went to the Peak District. He went to a place called Lyn Church, with all those strange cavernous rocks hanging down with lichen-like hair, green hair from the sides. He did bump into somebody there. It was actually somebody who was called the Green Knight. He asked him the 3 questions, but all the knight said was, "Are you Gawain?" And he said, "No, I'm not." So he said, "I can't be bothered," and rode away on his green horse. So the knight didn't get his answers to the questions at Lyn Church either. In the end, time passed. He'd been to Scotland, he'd been to Wales, he'd been to Cornwall, he'd been to East Anglia, been all over the British Isles, visiting all kinds of strange places. And he's talked to so many different people, but nobody knew the answer to these 3 questions. How much am I worth? How long would it take me to get round the world? And what am I thinking now? On his way back, he was desperately miserable. It was pouring with rain, it was dripping down his neck, his arm was all dirty, his horse was thin and bony, he felt famished, he felt nervous, he knew he was facing his execution. But on the road to the king's court, he bumped into a peasant. And as one last desperate shot, he said to this man wrapped up in his sackcloth clothing, "Do you know the answer to these 3 questions?" And these 3 questions were: how much am I worth? How long will it take me to get around the world? And what am I thinking now? And the peasant said, I can think of some answers to those questions. "Oh," said the knight, "can you tell me what the answers are?" The peasant said, "What I'd like you to do is actually lend me your armour, lend me your horse, lend me your cloak, and I will go to the court and I will ask Bad King John what he thinks of my answers. The knight was a bit worried about this because he thought the man might just be a thief and be making off with his horse and his armour and his cloak. But he thought, well, if I go to court and I can't answer the questions, I'll only be executed, so I might as well send him instead. So he agreed. He took the peasant's sackcloth covering and he gave the peasant the knight, the horse and the cloak. And the new knight, the peasant knight, rode all the way to the court of Bad King John. Eventually he appeared before the king. The year and the day were past. As a sign of penance, he wrapped the knight's cloak around his face and he knelt before Bad King John. Well, said Bad King John, can you tell me the answers to these 3 questions? Tell me, how much am I worth? Well, said the peasant, his voice and his accent a little bit muffled by the cloak, so that he wasn't recognisable as not being the knight, said, well, my lord, king, I don't suppose you rate yourself equal to your master, Lord Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ was considered at one point to be worth 30 pieces of silver. So I think you might be satisfied if I said to you that you are probably worth 29 pieces of silver. Well, Bad King John was quite flattered by that answer. So he said, yeah, that'll do. Right, okay, tell me, how long would it take me to get round the world? Well, said the peasant disguised as the knight, if you followed the sun and you went as fast as the sun, think about how long it would take the sun to get round back here. If it starts at 12 noon today, it'll be back here by 12 noon tomorrow. So I would say 24 hours. Oh, said Bad King John, that's quite a clever answer. OK, I'll let you have that one. Now, what am I thinking? Said the knight peasant. I think that you are thinking that I am the knight you sent away to find the answers to those 3 questions. Oh, said King John. At that moment, the knight peasant unwrapped the cloak from round his face, and the king discovered that it wasn't the man he thought it was, and so the peasant had successfully answered the 3 questions on behalf of the knight. And so the knight's life was spared, much to the umbrage of Bad King John. But the other knights were very pleased. Well, the peasant went back and met the knight on the road, who was very surprised to see him coming towards him, and very surprised to see that he was still alive. And he gave him back his armour, he gave him back his cloak, and he gave him back his horse. And he had given him back his life. Well, said the knight, what can I do to reward you? You saved my life. I'm in debt to you. Said the peasant. I don't really want anything. Why did you do it then? I did it because I'm interested in justice, said the peasant. And he put his wrapping round his neck again and set off down the road into the distance. The knight was rather puzzled by this, but he went back to court. And it wasn't until some years later, in 1215, that the idea of justice reoccurred to the knight and some of the other knights, and in that year the Magna Carta was born. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story. Do keep safe, do keep well, look after yourselves, enjoy visiting places where you can go. Thank you.